Hey guys, Jacob Howard here, and today I'm with the one and only Zoe FPV. And today, cut! So Zoe FPV is the undisputed champion of 3D FPV. So real quick, Zoe, talk about what 3D FPV is and give us an idea of what we can expect to see today, because this is going to be my first time ever flying 3D FPV. I'm really nervous because she showed off some of her skills earlier. but go ahead and explain real quick like what it is, why is it different than normal FPV?
Yeah, so a 3D FPV, if you may or may not know of 3D helicopters and the ability to fly upside down and do tic-tocs and crazy maneuvers, it essentially allows the drone to fly in crazy orientations. Each motor traditionally with a regular drone produces thrust downwards. With a 3D drone, you can actually have the thrust produced in both directions, allowing you to do mind-bending stunts that look like breakdancing in the air. So yeah, I'm a little concerned for him, because I've been on people's like first time flying a few times, 3D. Like this is like a regular thing for me, right? People are like, oh, I want to try 3D out. I want to go over to Zoe and I want her to see me do this, right?
We drove all the way to California just for that purpose.
Yeah, so I think you're probably going to crash at some point.
That's fair.
But I heard you have a little bit of simulator experience.
Just a little bit, especially this week. I've been brushing up my skills a little bit.
I think you'll be fine. Most people that start out in the simulator flying 3D, if you can figure out in a simulator, you should be able to translate it over to the real world fairly easily. Thankfully, if you want to learn it, you can get it in liftoff. I highly recommend liftoff for learning 3D. Try it in liftoff before you check out any other videos on how to get into it, because honestly, you're gonna probably break hardware. If you don't break it from crashing, you're gonna break it from your components literally catching fire from all the power it takes to perform the stunts that we use in 3D.
Yep. And with that said, these drones are made by professionals, so they are made specifically for 3D. You cannot just change one little thing on your drone and expect it to work like a 3D drone. So we're gonna get this set up. We're gonna talk a little bit more about what makes it a 3D drone and how we can do what it can do, and then I'm going to try my first take at this, and we'll see how it goes. And
then I'll show you all what a real 3D pro can do with a proper machine.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is the 3D drone. So these props right here are one of the big things that changes from a normal drone.
If not one of the only things that really changes. Like generally you can get in almost any drone to fly 3D. You don't even need special props. But a couple things make a 3D drone, and that is the propeller and a big beefy motor. The bigger the motor, the better, because you need a lot of torque to start and stop the motor mid-air to change directions to get that thrust in the opposite direction. And the biggest thing, what makes a 3D propeller is the fact that it's symmetrical. So it has the same airfoil design if it's spinning in this direction or this direction.
And thus,
it produces symmetrical thrust.
Yep, it's giving the same when it's upside down this way or this way, depending on where it's spinning. And to just clarify, you do have to have a correct mode for the controller.
Yes.
To fly it. You cannot just throw on your props upside down and in a weird way and it's going to fly right. That's not a good idea.
You have to set the drone up. You definitely have to set the drone up. So you're going to have to update the flight controller, enable 3D mode on the flight controller, and then you're going to have to actually update your ESCs, enable bidirectional mode on the ESCs. It takes about 5 minutes to do. It's super simple. I've actually thought about doing it and secretly putting 3D on people's drones that are around me and just putting it on a switch. But yo, that's a cool drone, can I fly it? And then mid-time just like turn 3D mode on and like blow their minds. But I don't want to mess with anyone's gear.
She's so good she can turn any drone into 3D just by holding the controller.
Pretty much. But yeah, there's nothing too special about it.
And what kind of like power requirements are going to be different? Because like you mentioned, like you don't want your drone bursting in the flames. Like like you said, like it's going to take a lot. So what it's doing is right now, if we're flying, this motor's spinning like this. If we go upside down, we want it spinning like this, so it's pushing the air down this direction.
Yes.
So obviously your motor has to then change direction in order to do that. And that's obviously going to put a lot of strain on your motor and I'm sure your ESC.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is like to stop the motor in a couple milliseconds means you have to dump power into the ESC, into the motor, and physically stop the motor, and that's like 100 amp burst. So you have to have a beefy ESC. I use 60 amp ESCs almost exclusively, and so at any point in time my drone has a peak amp burst of 240 amps. No, so basically I'm battery limited, and so the batteries I use are actually the limiting factor. which is what you want. So at one point, you can't pull, the battery can't be too powerful to destroy your equipment, but you can pull enough out of the battery where your equipment's not gonna, feel the hurt from so much amp draw.
And in this situation, what kind of battery do you have for it?
I use 4-cell right now. You can use 6-cell. It really doesn't matter. Just make sure it's high C. You're gonna want at least a 100C battery for it.
Okay.
GMB makes good batteries, China Hobby Line. You don't have to have an expensive battery. Just having a good battery makes all the difference. Because when you're doing TikToks and you're going back and forth between positive and negative direction and thrust, like your battery will sag into oblivion within a few seconds.
Yeah. Okay guys, so we're going to put the battery on this guy, we're going to take it off, and I'm going to do my first flight with it. Okay, so right now I'm just getting used to this throttled feel.
That's a big one. Your first 3D flight, you should be flying normally like this, but have it in 3D mode. That way you get used to how it feels to fly 3D in that mode. So if you freak out, you can just kind of throttle out of a bad situation and fly normally, quote unquote.
Okay, I'm going to flip.
Oh gosh, okay. Get some altitude,
Yeah, I will. Okay, I'm getting my bearings. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so far so good, so far so good. There's a tree there. So far so good, you came out of it really cleanly.
Thank you.
That's a big one, is just getting used to getting into that inverted position initially, and then getting used to getting out of it.
Yeah. That's one thing I practiced a lot in the simulator, was just like, I want to know how to get out of it in case of an emergency or anything.
Like my #1 tip for flying is, when in doubt, throttle out, because your positive throttle is still going to be towards the top of your throttle. And if you're good enough, you can correct self-right and throttle out of a bad situation. But getting your mind wrapped around that is difficult, because when I flew normally, when I get in a bad situation, my initial response is to throttle down. And with 3D, that means negative thrust, which means probably a worse crash.
Yeah, because you're pulling yourself towards the ground.
But if you can, remember, if you are in a bad situation, I highly recommend just like disarming. If you feel like you're about to crash, it's better to have the drone in a disarmed state when it crashes. So it's not actively applying power in the crash. You don't have motors spinning when they hit, and you have less of a chance of burning out electronics. But this is pretty typical for a first time flying 3D, is just getting used to the drone, getting used to the throttle range, and then getting used to getting it upside down. Because it's like going from a Mavic to FPV, you have to unlearn what I consider bad, like throttle habits. Because with the Mavic and like stabilized drones, it kind of manages the throttle for you, and you're constantly in the middle. Then when you go over to FPV, you have to manage the entire throttle range constantly, but you have to relearn it. Like there's a lot of people that go from FPV or from Mavics or a DJI product to FPV, and just the throttle control is difficult. And it's the same thing, going from regular flying to 3D, you have to unlearn a bunch of these habits and relearn how to use it. And on top of that, it's hard because generally your whole throttle range was the whole stick, but now you have half that range for your positive thrust, meaning you have to be way more accurate, you have to be way more precise to get the same kind of maneuvering out of a 3D drone as you would a regular setup. But if you do get good at it, I will say it will make you a better pilot in any kind of drone you fly from here on out. And that's kind of why I got into it. It was the most difficult thing to learn and the highest skill level ceiling I could find.
Okay, so that was my first time flying 3D FPV in real life. So it's actually kind of a little bit easier than it was in the simulator. I really enjoyed it. So we're actually gonna head over to another location with Zoe. We're gonna get some more footage in a little bit different of an area. We're gonna try it out. So let's head on over there. Hey guys, so we just finished at the last location for doing some 3D FPV. We're now in Glamis, California. Gonna hopefully do some sand dune flying. It is really windy, so we won't know for sure if we'll be able to get it. But just in case, so we wanted Zoe to go over just a few of the tips that she would give for 3D flying, so that you guys can have a better idea of how to kind of start out in 3D. But if we do get to do some more flying here, we'll make sure to put that footage at the end. But for now, Zoe, what are a few tips you have for 3D FPV for beginners?
So 3D can be very complex to get into. You have 3 major hurdles: the hardware, the setup, and of course actually flying. So the biggest one is, of course, just learning it. You know, you gotta learn, if you feel comfortable in the simulator, you're gonna be able to actually get into it. Second one, again, is hardware. Try to pick something more modern. You know, BL Heli 32 with a 2207 or bigger motor is really gonna give you good thrust and torque to really spin that motor up and down quickly. Then finally, check out other videos online of setup. You know, all the questions that people ask me every day are answered in videos I've already made. So go check those out, because that's going to give you a really good overview of how to set it up. If you don't set it up properly, you might accidentally hurt yourself.
Or your drone.
Or your drone. So that's my biggest safety tip, and my third one is, again, safety first, set it up, make sure you have it set up right, and do it the props off.
So those are the 3 tips from literally the professional on 3D FPV. So I hope you guys enjoy some of the clips we got.
3D is a very hard skill to get into. It takes a lot of time and skill and effort to get good at. So you've done pretty good considering you've just got simulator practice. I mean, you didn't destroy my drone.
I didn't destroy it. So I got something on a few other people who tried it out with her. So, you know, that's always a good thing. And that means a lot coming from Zoe, that I did at least a decent job. So as always, if you guys have any questions for me or Zoe about this, definitely let us know, and have fun flying.